Hi, folks, and welcome to another episode of Sean and Dave Make Music. Our guest this month, Melissa Dunphy, is a phenomenal, award-winning, nationally renowned composer and performer who also does a million other things I'm not going to try to list here. We talk about a lot of the different aspects of her professional and personal life in this episode, but I'm sure there are some things we missed too. So I'd recommend you spend some time exploring melissadunphy.com. You can find out a lot more about her there and listen to some examples of her work. Dave and I studied composition at Westchester University at the same time as Melissa, and ever since we met, her talent, work ethic, and attitude towards music has been an inspiration to me. It's inspired me to keep making new things and to keep making things in general. Just one quick specific plug before we jump into the interview. Her podcast, The Boghouse, is the insane, fascinating, and hilariously wild tale of how her and her husband, Matt, bought a magic theater in the heart of Philadelphia. So if you want to hear more of Melissa's crazy stories, make sure you check that out. It's a mix of history, true crime, archaeology, all told through a comedic lens, and I, for one, am hooked. It's so good. They're on a break right now, and I hope they come back soon. I just can't wait. We actually recorded this episode from said Boghouse in Philadelphia, and we had so much fun. So, Melissa and Matt, thank you so much for welcoming us into your home and letting us play with your toys and artifacts. And listeners, if this episode is half as fun to listen to as it was to make, you are in for a treat. Take a seat. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Sean and Dave Make Music. I'm so excited to be here in the Boghouse?
In the Boghouse? In the Hannah Callowhill
Welcome
stage? Yes, and you have taken seats.
Yes, okay,
Finally,
great.
someone has
literally taken a seat in the Boghouse.
Yeah, someone has heeded my instructions.
I've been dying to get this seat, so I'm happy. So, we're here with Melissa Dunphy. I don't even know how to list your credits.
Me
Podcaster,
neither.
amateur archaeologist, composer, improviser, all kinds of other things that I probably don't
sometime
even
actor,
know
although
about.
I'm
Shakespearean actress
back.
at times, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to get less of that because it's
Landlord.
landed gentry.
You did modeling at some point, right?
I did used to do modeling. Yeah, and I've had a lot of really weird careers on my way to this position. I was a junior legal secretary for a while when I was 18, and then I was a wine consultant, which means I sold wine over the phone for a telemarketing wine club. Learned a lot about wine, had a really great palate, and then I worked in IT for a subdivision of GE, and then I worked in TV production. I've done a lot of weird jobs.
When did you move here? That's something I don't know. I listened to your episode of Puppeteers that you did the other day because I wanted to. By the way, go listen to Melissa on Puppeteers. That was a good interview.
Puppeteers, yeah.
Yeah, but I just like to know what topics to avoid that have already been out there and ask you about other things. So, sort of your origin story. Before you found composing, what brought you to this country, first of all? I know you're from Australia.
Fell in love with Matt, and we'll actually probably be covering this on the Boghouse in a couple weeks as well. But we met over a mutual love of Nine Inch Nails, the band. Yep. He has a Nine Inch Nails website, and it was my favorite website. And I came to America on a vacation when I was 22. And I thought, well, I should meet up with this guy I've been chatting with online for the longest time. And this was in 2002. So in 2002, meeting someone on the internet was like, oh boy, that's weird.
Oh yeah, there was a stigma for sure.
Yeah.
And going to another country
different
to meet
country.
him.
Yeah. Oh, Melissa's gonna go meet up with a serial killer who's, catfishing her and is probably not anything like he looks like online, and is, definitely a serial killer though, because America is just full of serial killers. And
well, that was probably part of the draw too, right?
Oh, sure. Like, who doesn't want to meet a serial killer from America online? But I met him, and he was even nicer than he was in the chat. And we had this amazing chemistry, and we ended up road tripping down to New Orleans and back.
Cool.
And New Orleans did something to us, and by the time the trip was over, we were like, oh, no, we're in love. Can I swear on this podcast?
Oh, yeah.
Shit, we're in love. And what do we do? And so we did the long distance thing for a while, and then we were like, we just have to get married. It's the only way. It's the only way. We have to just get married. So in 2003, I came to America. At this point, I was always a musician.
And where did you get your start? On viola or cello?
Well, actually on piano, which you would not believe because I am the world's worst pianist. Like, my students laugh at me because my piano skills are so poor. When I was a little girl, like 4 or 5, my Chinese mother, very typical Chinese tiger mom, took me to piano lessons because she had heard it makes you better at math. And I was pretty good at piano. I learned with the Yamaha piano school, which is distinct from Suzuki. And the Yamaha method of teaching, I think, actually really contributed to me being a composer and improviser. There was a lot of stuff that I think about it now, and I'm like, this is a good way to teach little kids. They would play the first half of a melody, of a sentence, and you had to finish it.
Oh, cool.
So there would be a classroom of kids, and the teacher would start off with a really simple melody that would end on the dominant, and then it would get passed around to you, and you would play it, and you had to end up on the tonic.
Very cool.
Yeah, and I'm kind of like, that's a really awesome way to teach kids the language of music.
Absolutely.
And we had the same kind of thing, but with chords, as you got sort of more progressed. But I was never a great pianist. When I was 7, I was at a private all-girls school, a scholarship kid, and they had us play a stringed instrument in 4th grade. So I started violin for that. Was never also the greatest violinist in the world because I didn't practice. I was one of those horror students who would practice 15 minutes before my lesson and kind of skate. And it's like, you could be better, but...
Yep.
It's not in my nature to practice that hard.
Yeah.
Then when I was 14, I had an epiphany one day when I was at a math contest. I think music actually did make me better at math. So
I'm glad it worked for one of us.
I know. I was at this math Olympiad contest, and I was on a break, and I remember this so clearly. I was sitting under a tree, and it was like an epiphany from the heavens. I can't explain it. A voice inside my brain went, switch to viola. Like, it was that clear. And I went to my math Olympiad team and was like, I just got this amazing idea. I'm going to switch to viola. And they were like, Melissa, we don't care. Why are you telling us this?
I feel like most schools would be thrilled to have a bonus viola player.
Well, these were like math kids and the math teacher. They were like, why are you thinking about this? You're supposed to be solving these algebra problems. And I'm like, no, but I can't wait to get back to school. I'm going to go straight to my music teacher and switch to viola. And they're like, shut up. And that's all I could talk about for the rest of the day. I get back to school, I run to my teacher, and she was primarily a violist, actually, but she taught violin as well. Mm-hmm. So I said the words, I'm switching to viola, and she, near burst into tears with happiness. Yeah. She was so delighted, right? So I actually started practicing when I switched to viola.
Cool.
And sometimes I think that that's a thing, like, if you switch instrument, the challenge of learning a new skill and a new instrument can make you more diligent.
I agree. Sure. And I think it's especially fun to learn a second instrument that's very related to your first one, because so much of the mechanics are already there,
right? And
you can work on the areas that you need to, and the other foundation is already there.
Yeah.
That's similar with woodwinds too.
Yeah. Of course, because so many of them have related fingering
systems.
And, yeah, but it's like something about the new timbre and the novelty of it. I suddenly started practicing for like 2-3 hours a day. What? So I reached my peak at 16 on viola. I was a really good violist when I was 16. Yeah, and I kept playing. I played in a couple youth orchestras. I toured to the west coast of the USA, and I toured to Japan and Korea with some youth orchestras. I fell out of love with classical music for a while. I got really pissed off that I played a recital, and I played the Ernest Bloch meditation, and I missed the climax. It's like this jump into, I don't know, like 10th position or something, and I missed it. Flubbed the note completely and walked off stage and burst into tears. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. And then you were the once bitten, twice shy. It's going to take forever to get back.
But then I thought about it, and I started getting really mad at the culture of classical music that I fucked up one note And it was universally considered a failure. Like, oh no, you fucked up that one note. And I kind of had this, I was mad, I was angry. I thought to myself, this isn't what music is supposed to be about. And that's the point at which I said, okay, I'm going to stop practicing for 3 hours a day on technical chops and explore other options. And so I joined a couple bands. I joined a folk band. I did street musician stuff for a while. I, started playing in insane goth electro punk bands and just exploring other options. And the freedom of you fuck up a note on stage, you laugh, and the audience loves you for being human is, God, sometimes I wish I could take classical music by the collar and just shake it and be like, stop.
Yeah. And the idea that there's only one perfect interpretation, that it doesn't exist, but we're all like fighting in any piece. It's like, oh, it's got to be that one perfect. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Fuck
it's a little bit nuts. And it's a little bit like nobody in the audience cares. Nobody is sitting there going like, oh shit, that was a bit pitchy or whatever. You know what I mean?
We're all in this together.
Right.
Like it's an experience that we're sharing. Right.
And it's about the emotions and about the shape of it and the communication and the narrative. And those are the things that are most important.
First up today, we've got a little tune we're going to call Underground. We came up with the chord progression together, which I played on the ukulele. Melissa sang and played toy piano, and Dave played a Stylophone beatbox, handheld synthesizer, and drum machine, which is a little metal circular device with numbers on it that you tap with a stylus to generate the tone.
I was doing music on the side. I was playing in bands. I came to America. I was doing a lot of acting in Shakespeare companies but still playing music on the side. Oftentimes, because I was an actor, the company would learn I was a musician and have me play music in shows as well. So I was in a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream at the Harrisburg Shakespeare Festival, and the music director dropped out of the show with no music written because he was going through some personal stuff. And the director came to me and said, "Will you write some music for this show?" I had not written anything since really high school, and I was 24 at this point. And I said, okay, sure, let me try it. And so I was working at a PBS NPR station at the time as well during the day. So I would spend my day working at WITF in Harrisburg, then my evening rehearsing with the Harrisburg Shakespeare Festival, and then I'd come home and compose till like 2 o'clock in the morning, and then get up at 8 and do it all over again. And one of those 2 o'clock in the morning sessions, I had another epiphany, like the Viola epiphany, where something in my brain went, oh fuck, this is it. This is what you want to do. This is it. Quit everything else. You want to be a composer. This is tickling all the left brain, right brain things. You don't have to practice that hard because you don't really have to play. You just have to write the notes on the page. It's kind of like solving a puzzle, but it's also like creating a work of art at the same time. And that's really interesting to me. So I tell people, I went to Google and I typed in how to be a composer, and Google was like, go to grad school. And I was like, I don't have an undergrad yet. What do I do? And I went researching schools in the area, and people were like, oh, you could go to this school. It costs $50,000 a year. Or you could go to Penn State and live in the middle of nowhere surrounded by people who are obsessed with football. Or you can go to Westchester University, super reasonably priced. And the faculty, they have a robust composition program, and the faculty, a lot of them got their PhDs at the University of Pennsylvania, which I thought was this. I was like, I think that's a school I want to go to for grad school because I'd love to live in Philly. And they offer a free ride and stipend for all of their PhD students. It's like a free ride and a $25,000 a year stipend. And minimal teaching. So I was like, that's the grad school I want. Here's the undergrad place I'm going to go to first, and it all worked out really well. And I met you two there.
I think it's so interesting that you settled on classical music because you enjoy so many different things and have done so many different things. And I
came back.
And I feel like succeeded at or could succeed at a million different things that you want to do. It's hard to decide sometimes, but
it felt like home a little bit, but also with the experience of those other things that I could avoid some of the pitfalls of classical music.
Totally. You've got so much knowledge you can draw on.
Right.
And there are really, at this point in classical music, no rules to break.
Yes. It's a lot freer than it was in like the mid to late 20th century. And a lot of things are being broken down. A lot of the sexism and the racism and the weird, cloistered ivory tower shit is being broken down, and that's a really good thing.
Totally.
But it's interesting. So when I enrolled at Westchester, they said you have to declare a major instrument. Or when I applied at Westchester, and I was like, oh no, do I have to go back to viola? And at that point, I kind of went, fuck it, I think I'm going to take up a new instrument again. And that's why you met me as a cellist.
So that was, you just starting on it then?
Yeah, I played it for 6 months, and then I auditioned, and they let me in, which is kind of hilarious. And I was always a shitty cellist.
I think you just need to demonstrate to them enough that you can get by on one thing, and then you're allowed to compose.
Do you have potential that you could work and it could be serviceable? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Will you look like serviceable in the orchestra? Will you look like you could be playing the correct notes? Maybe. Is your bow moving in the correct direction? Then sure, go in the orchestra. So they let me into the orchestra. But after I finished my degree at Westchester, I came back to viola, and again it was like coming home. But I felt like a better violist.
I'm sure,
for having wandered, and that's like something that I feel like classical music especially we're so youth obsessed, and we're so get everything done as fast as possible. Like, be a child prodigy and go to Curtis when you're like 9 and get your bachelor's degree by the time you're 15.
And if not too late.
And if not too late,
Right.
right. Oh no, you're 25, you're over the hill, you haven't achieved anything, you know, you're done. And that's bullshit on so many levels, but even on just on an artistic level, you grow so much as a human being. And going and taking time off or going and living your life and doing other things will make you a better musician. I'm really convinced of that.
Oh, yeah.
I feel terrible for people who just go like high school, music school, you know what I mean? And never have time to live because they're practicing for 5, 6, 7 hours a day. And then they're becoming a concert pianist or going and living the orchestra life. And you know
Totally.
what I mean?
Yeah, that's a friend of mine from Cincinnati. This guy, Dave McDonnell. When he was, I knew him. He was doing his PhD there at the time, and when he was kind of presenting, you know, the masterclass session, I'm like, "Here's the history of my work," and he's got the PowerPoint going. And at one point, he just was like, "And then after I finished my master's program," and then he brought up this thing, and it just said like "the years of wandering" or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like, this is a decade where I just played a lot of jazz, and I had bands, and I journeyed. It's like, then I came back around. You know?
For sure. That's so funny because that's what I call the years between when so when I straight out of high school, I went to med school because I thought I wanted to be because my mom thought I wanted to be a doctor, and I quit after 9 months. And then that time, like, then I did the legal secretary, and I call that also my wandering in the wilderness period. And that was 8 years. So that's really analogous.
Totally.
And then came back to music and was like, I don't regret that at all, you know, despite the fact that by the time I enrolled at Westchester when I was 26, I had already aged out of the like BMI Young Composers contest, which has a cutoff of 24. And I'm like, I'm just starting and I'm already old.
Yep.
Great, thanks for that chip on my shoulder. But despite that, I'm like, I can put together a contract. I can sell myself on the phone and off the phone. I can, you know, put together my computer setup. I'm good at fixing things. I have all of these other things that I can do, and that
you don't need to hire people for.
Yes, and it's super helped me out in my career.
I'm sure.
So I don't regret it at all.
Our next track is very much the opposite of the last one. This is an experimental free improvisation with me on flute, Melissa on her home-built Theremin, and Dave on some found object percussion and a typewriter. So I want to talk a little bit about, or hear a little bit about your compositional process and maybe a little bit about the commission process. You told us a little bit about that off mic, and more so just I'm sure there are a million ideas floating around in your head that could all become pieces. Mm-hmm. How do you choose one if you're not working on a commission or
right?
Something like that?
Well, it's changed over time. So the freest time that you have as a composer is in school. In school, it's all up to you, really, unless you have a real hard-ass teacher that definitely wants you to compose a trombone concerto or something, which has happened to some people. But for whatever reason, maybe because I was slightly older than the typical undergrad or even graduate student, I was never pressured to write anything I didn't want to write in school.
I pretty much had that same experience.
Yeah,
at Westchester.
Yeah,
totally.
I had a pretty free reign of what I wanted to write.
Right. Yeah, Westchester was very good like that. I would just show up to my lessons and be like, I'm writing a cantata. And they'd
be
say,
like, cool.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, which I super appreciate. Some students might need more guidance than others, but I was like, these are the things I want to write, and I would just write them. And so that was kind of, I knew when I wanted to write something because I would get really emotional about something extra musical, and then I would want to express that musically. I don't think that's the one true way of composition, in any respect, you know. But that for me, composition is such an intensive process that you need to have some kind of inspiration that carries you through that process, which can sometimes go on for months at a time. So if it's not something that really excites you from get, I think it would be very difficult to retain that level of commitment and to do this kind of lonely activity, sitting in front of a computer, stewing in your own disgusting sweat usually.
And using your brain so hard.
Yes. Yeah.
Like
and
really
I call it, there's a composition sweat that I get that smells extra bad. Like, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's like impurities in your brain, like being swedded out of your pores.
That's so
from all of this.
Any neuroscientists listening, let us know if you have insight
Right,
on that.
I know. I'm like, there's something that goes on when I'm in front of my computer composing. I don't even, it's not that I don't shower, because sometimes I don't when I'm really in the zone. But even before that, I'm like, I stink. What the hell?
It's really funny.
It's weird. The metabolism of composing is strange. So it can be this. It's very intense. It's an intense process, and you have to sacrifice stuff in order to do it. You have to sacrifice, to some level, your social life. You have to sacrifice, having a nice, clean house. Sometimes you sacrifice eating because you've got to get something out by a deadline. So I get inspired by extra musical things. Then when I graduated school, when I was finishing my PhD, I had all these other crazy things going on with regard to buying a magic theater from a pedophile and doing archaeology. So I kind of thought, I'll get my PhD and I won't go out looking for commissions. I'll take a little break and I'll continue doing my fun side project with the theater. But the weirdest thing happened, and I don't know if this is true for every composer, but it was true for me. I had been writing some choral music while I was getting my PhD, and I had started to get a name for myself as a choral composer. And I always tell young composers, if you want an easy way to sort of get commissions, start writing choral music, because choral music is self-propagating. You write a choir piece, you get a good choir to sing it. In the good choirs, every member of that choir has another choir that they sing with. And if they like your piece, they will take your piece to the other choirs. And it's like you don't have to market yourself.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Right? And I'm kind of like, it was so eye-opening when this happened in the choral world, because I cannot imagine that happening in the orchestral world.
Not at all.
I've been an orchestral musician.
Yeah, they usually don't have much of a say at all.
You don't, right?
Yeah.
Right. Choirs are much more democratic, so it's not like me sitting fifth desk violas or whatever can be like, oh wow, that's a really great piece. I'm going to take it to my other conductor friend and tell them to. That happens so rarely, and orchestral musicians seem to be much less invested in the repertoire.
Yeah.
It's like it just comes down from on high. The totalitarian dictator conductor says, you're playing Prokofiev this season. And
I feel like a lot of their variety only comes from the fact that they're doing multiple gigs. Like they'll be like, with this orchestra, we're doing traditional rep. This one is the pop stuff. This one is the chamber ensemble.
For sure. Yeah. It's like a very different world. Also, choir pieces tend to be shorter, and they sing a lot more of them on a concert. So choir directors are always looking for new rep.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is all to say, I finished my PhD and I thought, great, I'll take a little break. And instead, it was like the second I walked across that stage and got my paper in my hand, the commission calls started coming in. I'm very lucky. This was like an incredible...
Yeah, I was going to say, no, that doesn't happen to everyone.
I will not. I'm sure. I can't complain about this. I know it sounds like I'm complaining. I'm aware of how lucky I am, but it was like, yeah, maybe the message here is when you want things to slow down, they'll speed up. And probably when you want things to speed up, they'll slow down. And this is freelance.
Be thankful for your wandering period.
Right.
I hope you enjoyed it.
Right? Because it doesn't happen anymore. Yeah.
You're on.
It's kind of like when you work in retail, and I've worked in retail. I mean, who hasn't worked in retail in the arts, right? Where it's always a huge rush of people and then nothing.
Yep.
Right? And everyone's experienced that. And it's like a weird brain connection thing that human beings have to each other, that we for some reason we all go to the restaurant at the same time, and then we all leave at the same time, and the poor waitress or waiter or whatever is like, oh my god, that was I'm insane now.
Yeah.
I've lost my mind. Thank you.
Now I'm gonna wrap silverware for 3 hours.
Right. Exactly. Wrapping silverware for 3 hours because nobody is coming. So what usually happens with the commission is an organization or a choir contacts me, and one of two things happens. Either they say, we have a text that we'd love you to set, or we have a theme that we want you to set, or they'll say, we don't know what we want to do. We just want a piece from you. We want a new piece. Sometimes they'll say, here is the concert that we want to premiere your new piece on. We have chosen these other pieces. Yeah. Can you write a piece of music that fits into this program in some way, or has a dialogue with the other pieces on the program or something? Or they'll just give me free reign. And
what
say,
do you prefer? Would you like to have some sort of guidance, or is it nice to have the free reign?
I like all of it. I know that's really I'm being indecisive there, but
it's a truthful answer. No, it's fine. Yeah.
Right, because they're very different things. Sometimes it's fun when a choir gives me a text and I'm like, are you kidding me? I never would have chosen this text by myself. But then that becomes like a challenge.
Yeah, it pushes you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, you're like, can I take this text that I never would have chosen and turn it into a Melissa Dunphy piece of music? Yeah, okay, that's fun. Sometimes when a choir gives me complete free range, so I have a Google Doc where if I get an idea in the middle of the night or whatever for a piece of music, I'll throw it into the Google Doc, and it's not curated at all. There are some utterly shithouse ideas on that doc. Shout out to my murder mystery opera that I thought I'd put in there one time. How fun! A murder mystery opera. Melissa, you're never going to write that. Okay. Unless someone wants to commission me $40,000, I'll write you a murder mystery opera. Anyway.
Or pretty much any other opera.
Yeah, I mean, sure.
Right?
Yeah, I'll do
45.
Yeah.
If you pick the subject, it's 45. If it's murder mystery, it's 40.
So I can draw from that list of things, because copyright is the way that it is. I often troll like public domain websites for new poets that I didn't know about before, poets who've been forgotten by history, often because they're women or they're writing about low subjects or whatever, and let's see if I can find those, and then I'll list those names and those poems in there and pull them out. And then it's just a matter of me in my pajamas in front of my computer,
sweating it out,
and stinking really bad. My poor husband, poor Matt. My God, it must reek when he comes home from me composing all day. I also go out, I have back deck, which is right next to my composition area. And it's really loud out there because of the highway. So if I go out there, I can like sing it out.
Oh, yeah.
So usually when I write stuff, I improvise vocally first, even if it's instrumental. So I'll just walk around in a circle on my deck and sing. And
Find it.
Yeah, and find it. And my rule is if you sing it and then you forget it right away, it must have been kind of crap. But if you sing it and you remember it,
it's a reassuring thing to tell yourself it works.
To let go of all those ideas that have floated away.
Yeah, because that
Just tell
happens,
yourself
right?
there, shit.
You've had that experience, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you're like, wow, that was a great melody.
Yeah, we talked about this when we had Robert Dick on the podcast.
Okay.
And he was saying, like, yeah, I used to think, like, if you think of something and you don't write it down, if it's good enough, it'll come back. But
not always.
Not always. I've realized that it's safer to write it down right away.
Yeah, I have
He was like song title, like piece titles for this.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Kind of a different thing.
Sure. I've had one, like, hilarious instance in the car when I was writing music for the Cherry Orchard at People's Light out in the suburbs, the theater. I had been agonizing over, like, what's the main theme going to be? What is it going to be? And I was driving to the theater and it came to me in the car. Sometimes it really is like that, right? It's so...
Totally.
You understand why people invented, muses and demigods that give you this shit, because I don't know where it comes from half the time. But I'm driving down the street and I'm like, there it is. I hear it. And so I'm like, trying to navigate ways, at the same time as turn on my recorder while I'm driving, and then I'm singing into the recorder, like, here it goes, okay. I'm like singing the line, dun, 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 dun. Oh shit, it's traffic light. Okay, okay, start again, dun, 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 and then get to the theater and it's still there.
And it's just so fun to, like, that's when it sparks, and then you have to find the way to get it to other people and translate it into a written language.
Yeah.
And
That part's fun. That's the
journey.
puzzle. That's the puzzle solving part.
Right.
Which tickles me.
Here's another free improvisation we did that's a decidedly different character. Gritty, chaotic, driving rock with Melissa on viola, me on flute, and Dave back on the old stylophone beatbox, this time on a different setting.
I'm learning gradually as I do more composition that I have to take breaks or I burn out.
Actually, that kind of reminds me, one of the things I wanted to ask is your writing process. It could be one of these three or totally different, but do you tend to do like marathon sessions a couple times a week, or like you're like set at these hours most mornings or days?
Oh, no.
Or is it like spare, like a half hour here, 20 minutes there?
Oh God,
like,
no, it's marathon.
Marathon,
It's all or bust, and it's probably not the healthiest thing in the world. When I was in therapy, I tried so hard to work with my therapist to develop like a healthy habit where I'm working every day and then I put it down. And I just can't.
I think sometimes it just doesn't work that way. Like, if I
sounds
know
like
I have
shit.
a huge chunk of time, I can settle in and work on something.
Right.
But if I have 2 hours, I feel like I can't get anything done or can't get into that space.
Yeah,
I don't know.
nothing comes out. And then when you force something out, it will sound like shit. I can't explain it. And I wish there was some way that I could do because I've heard of composers who work from 9 to 5 and then put it down and have a life. But for me, it's like, okay, I have a thing due on this date and I will percolate ideas. Here's as good as I've gotten it. This is as good as I've gotten it. Usually I'll get a text, if I'm writing a vocal piece. And I'll pull out the text and I'll read it. And if I get an idea for a snippet of something, I'll shove it in Sibelius. But I won't actually do the work of creating it in a real form until minimum, like a maximum of like 2 weeks before the due date.
You just, the crunch time when you have to make the real hard decisions.
Yeah,
of it.
and quite often it won't come together until like 3 days before the due date, and then I just don't sleep for 3 days.
Yeah. I don't know if you've had this experience. I'm very similar in that like the deadline inevitably will become like, there's that crunch time period where you're like, it was fuzzy and lovely and now I have to make hard decisions. But then I beat myself over the head later on where I'm like, you know what? That piece would have been so much better if only.
If like, only you'd
which
like,
is really like, come on, no. It was what it was going to be. But
because sometimes I really have tried, and often there's no... Some of my best pieces have flown out of me in like a day and a half. And you're just like, it's perfect, it's great. And then you agonize over something for weeks and weeks, and it's garbage. It just doesn't come together. And it's such a mystery. It really is such a mystery. If the person who figures out how to really properly hack that part of their brain to do it consistently, or to not have that crunch, will be a multimillionaire. I don't know.
There have been so many times for me where I'm very much in the same, like just a marathon kind of thing. So it'll be like, oh, I don't have anything to do until 3 o'clock today. I have to leave by 2:30. This is great. I'm just going to sit down. It's 10 a.m. And then like you blink. It's like, holy fuck. It's 2:25. I haven't eaten. I haven't showered.
You're eating in the shower. You're like brushing your teeth
running
while
out
you
the
eat.
door. So what happened? Like, there's so many times with Angie, if there's a night where I'm not teaching, where she'll come in and she'll be like, Dave, dinner's gonna be ready in about like 20 minutes, just so you know. I'm like, okay, cool. And then I'm like, just one more thing. And then I'm like, all right, I'm gonna be responsible and put it down now. And I step out into the living room, and she's already been done eating. Like, and I'm just like,
I have to wonder if it's something with the creative brain, like why? Because I've heard this same story from so many composers. I don't know. It's different with a large scale work. That's the only time when, because
you have to sort of compartmentalize.
You cannot write an opera in 3 days unless who used to do that? I forget. Was it Donizetti? I forget. One of the bel canto Italian composers wrote an opera in like 3 days or something, and someone told me that story, and I was like, fuck you, do not tell me this story, because then I will start thinking that I can write an opera in 3 days, and I won't write my opera steadily over time. I'm pretty sure it's going to take longer than that. And it's what I tend to do now is I do that marathon, and then I deliberately give myself a break, because I've made the mistake now in this part of my career where I've done cascading deadlines. I'm like, well, if it takes me like 5 days to write a piece, I can just have like write that piece this week and this piece this week, and and I burn out. I really do. I get crazier and crazier as the deadlines cascade, and by the time I'm at the last deadline, I'm like, I've made a terrible mistake. I should have become an accountant. This is dumb fucking career, and everything I write sucks, and fuck you too, and I would like to drop out of this and do literally anything else with my life.
How often does that happen?
A couple times.
Okay.
It crosses my mind, and then I think about it, and I'm like, Melissa, could you really work for someone else at this point? No, I don't think so. I've tried that. I'm not that good at it. And I think about what I would miss. I mean, composition is not for everyone.
Yeah, I think this is a good segue into talking a little bit about the theater.
Yeah,
and a lot of times we like to ask people about like their dream project of what they're doing. This seems to be it for you. But I want to hear a little bit about how you envision it functioning after it gets up and running. What are some acts that you're really interested in bringing in?
I originally thought about the theater really as it's a part of my career as well. It's a space that I can use to present my own work, but also to present and curate the work of all of these amazing artists that we all hang out with. And and because it's a small space, so the theater, eventually the Hannah Callowhill stage will be a small sort of storefront 50 to 70 seat theater, and it's a perfect size for recitals, for solo recitals. It's a great size for experimental work, and this is what's really exciting to me, is that because it's so small, you don't have to worry about pleasing everyone. You can, if it were a 300-seat house, there would be pressure to sell 300 tickets. It's a 50 to 70-seat house. You can sell 50 tickets pretty easily, and then you play to a packed house. So it feels good from the performer's perspective, and it's great for stuff that you that wouldn't necessarily be accepted in a mainstream large concert hall or whatever. So I really want it to be multidisciplinary. Small theater shows, lectures even, I could even see sort of a stand-up comedy thing happening there every now and again. On the music side, as I said, it would be great for recitals, it would be great for chamber music, it would be great for very small-scale operas, like really small-scale stuff that you could put together, monodramas and things like that. I also have a big foot in the puppetry world, so it's a great size for puppetry, because not all puppetry, but a lot of puppetry is smaller than life. So an intimate theater is really the perfect venue for stuff like marionettes or tabletop puppetry or things like that. And then also, movement, dance. If you can constrain it into a small space, 15 by 15, we could totally do that. I really want it to be as wide a variety of things as possible. Like, one of the other things is at the top of the proscenium there's a steel beam, and it's weight bearing. It can bear weight safely. So my circus arts friends have been like,
Philly has a lot of them.
We have a ton. There are so many circus companies in this town. It's really bizarre, like acrobatic companies. And all of my circus arts friends are like, oh, we can put a clamp on that steel beam and do aerial and trapeze and
Very cool.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, that would be amazing. You would like swing out, and it would be so cool. So this is kind of what I'm thinking, and my idea is, yes, there will be some Melissa Dunphy presents my own work, whatever, in the theater, but a lot of it is going to be, what cool things would I love to have in this space? Let's curate it. Let's make deals with people. The Airbnb means I can bring people in from out of town. You can do a residency, and I know this is too much, and I want to start a school. A composition school, where I teach people music, what I think is a better way than Western classical music currently
That
teaches
seems
students.
like the path rather than tenure track
Right?
at a university.
Yeah,
It seems like the path.
Well, like
yeah.
theater owner, impresario. Like
Right,
you've
right.
got your own
Yeah.
institution at that point.
But I have real thoughts about, and I mean, you two are amazing composers as well and improvisers, but this is not usually the path for people who study classical music. Like you said, it's like you get to study the one true interpretation of a piece by some guy who's been dead for 200 years. Like that is...
And if that's what you want to do, it's hard to get there. Like one of those jobs, you have to really want it. And, and like...
And a lot of people go into that work and find out that it's not as fulfilling as they thought it would be. Like once you get used to playing a thing and being applauded, once that loses its sheen, it's like, well, what am I really doing?
What's the payoff if it's not that?
Right. And to me, well, the rant that I give, and I've given this rant a lot, is music is a language. Imagine if you studied French, but all you did was memorize Proust and stand up on a stage and recite Proust. And if you fucked up a vowel, everyone in the audience was like, oh shit, they fucked up a vowel. And then you walked off stage and like you said, now I can speak French. No, you can't. You can't speak French. Can you say your own thoughts in French? Can you express yourself in French? Can you write a short story in French? No, you can't. You can't speak French. You don't know French. And yet we teach kids that this is how to learn the language of music. Study some long dead thing, memorize it, get up on stage, don't fuck up a vowel. And
the smallest space between two notes is a half step. Nothing else.
Right, yes. There are no other notes.
Right.
Just like on a piano. The piano is the only correct tuning. Also, it's the only way to play. If you're not in tune with the piano, you're out of tune. And then, but yeah, like how many classical musicians do you know who can't improvise to save themselves, Couldn't. Yeah. And it's not their fault. I'm not shitting on them as like, you're a bad musician. You're not. Music pedagogy has failed you. Western classical music pedagogy has failed you because you don't know how to say a paragraph of your own thoughts.
Well, that's exciting to me. I'm really glad that you've got that in your mind to do for the future.
This is what I want to do. Yeah, I want to just rip it all apart.
This next one is the first piece that we played together at our session. We decided to start things off in the nice peaceful key of C major, and it features Melissa on viola, me on flute, and Dave on found object percussion, most of which was pulled out of the ground this time. Lots of sherds and bottle sounds in this one. one of the questions that I had written down to ask you was, have you ever thought about forming your own cult? and you're kind of getting there a little bit with this, so just
the
like
musical,
basically make it like a musical.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I'll start with children. Yeah, absolutely. Get the little children in, feed them lots of sugar and no protein, and
the Dunphy method instead of Kodai.
Kodai. Here, eat this sugar, children. No protein for you. Oh my God,
I know. In the composition sweat lodge.
Composition. Ew. That's the way you go to be punished. I feel like I know way too much about because I love reading about cults. So
it's one of the most fascinating subjects to me too. It really is. Do you listen to Zealot?
No,
there's a podcast called Zealot.
It's all about cults.
Yeah,
I listened to the Heaven's Gate podcast. It's like a short run podcast.
I haven't listened to that one, but I know the story.
Yeah, you should read it. It took me a little moment to realize the two leaders of the cult were like a woman and a man, and they called themselves T and Do.
Oh God.
And it took me a second or two of them saying that before I was like, solfege? They're calling themselves leading tone and tonic? That's amazing. Okay, but and Scientology and
it's so fascinating.
But I feel like because I read so much about cults, I'd actually be pretty good at starting one because I know all the
tricks.
To
the first rule of starting a cult, though, is you can't tell people that you're starting a cult. You've got to
maybe. Although I wonder
at this point, I think you could come right out and
just say it.
Join my cult. Here's what we're about.
Dave, I think you're like really optimistic about the human race. Because,
I know.
Like
I'm
I could
ignoring
stand in
the state
what
of
was
our
it?
world
I could shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue and nobody would, and I could still.
Yep.
Like he was very brazen about what he could get away with.
Or just Rudy Giuliani a couple days ago. This is going to now be dating this episode, of course, but
that's okay. Yeah,
there's just constant.
Yeah, they're admitting it.
Yeah. Oh, wholeheartedly.
You can admit all kinds of nefarious things, and people will just go, "Oh, they don't mean it," or "They're kidding." If they're so entertaining, you just have to be entertaining. Are you not entertained?
Yeah, exactly. Why so serious?
This is now the movie quotes podcast.
Movie quotes portion we've entered.
The cult podcast.
Yeah, I'm just looking at my list here, trying to see if there's anything else that I missed that
I've got
wanted to ask.
One
we're just about out of time.
Okay. So this kind of plays off of your visions of what you wanted to do with the theater, of different types of acts to bring in. So you're pretty clued into the Philadelphia scene. So it would be good to ask for our listeners and everything. What are like a few things coming up that they could be your own projects or just other people that you know of? But what's stuff happening this summer that people should not miss out on? Like what's the stuff that people in the know is coming up?
Okay, well, obviously the Fringe Festival comes up in Philadelphia every September, and it's overwhelming. I did the Gonzalez cantata in the Fringe Festival in 2009, I think it was, and it has gotten so much bigger even since then. It's impossible now to see all of the good shows in the Fringe because you just don't have enough slots on your dance card to see that many shows. So I always try to make it to Fringe, but what usually ends up happening is that I get into Fringe shows. I get involved in a Fringe show, and then you can't see anything else. There's also Opera Philly. I've been sort of getting more involved with Opera Philly. They're one of the only opera companies in the country that's doing really innovative new ideas, which I super appreciate.
Well, that's convenient that it's your city.
I know, right? It's so exciting to me to live in a town with an opera company that is really trying to push that boundary and take risks on new work and new formats. And so they have like their opera at Independence Hall. They do the screening of an opera on the lawn at Independence Hall, but they also have a festival, the O2 Festival, which I think is, gosh, you'd have to look it up online, but it's their opera festival where they do more experimental, newer works alongside some of the older stuff, and you can see like a whole ton of opera in a week. And I think that's really awesome. There are some this summer in Philadelphia, and this is unusual, in June next month Chorus America is having their national conference here at the convention center.
Okay.
So for a week in the third week of June, I think it is, the third or fourth week of June, choirs from all over the country will be performing. I know the Mendelssohn Club is giving a big performance. The Crossing, which is probably Philadelphia's best known new music choir, is one of the featured choirs that'll be around for Chorus America that summer. So that's exciting, and that's happening too. Right now, currently, my sound design is in a show that's running through May 26.
This won't be out before then.
Oh.
Probably not.
Just cut that. Okay.
Yeah, go on to any of your other plugs or things
what else do I
that
have
are
coming
you
up?
specifically.
I mean, it's funny. Most of my commissions coming up are outside of Philadelphia.
Okay.
And I have like all of these commissions coming down the pike now. I'm writing a work for the St. Louis Chamber Chorus that'll be out in September that's based on gravestone inscriptions at Gallipoli from World War One. Yeah, so it's another sort of war story. I keep doing war pieces. I don't know what that's about. And
it's almost like our society has a fascination with it.
I know, good or bad. Yeah. Next year, I have some really exciting projects that I have my fingers crossed will come into fruition. I won't mention the names of the people I'm working with because it's not 100% sure that funding is coming down yet. But, I'm really excited about this one. You heard of the union leader Mother Jones? There's a news outlet named after her, but she was a union leader in like the 20s and 30s.
Okay.
She, in the 1920s, led a protest march called the March of the Mill Children. So Kensington, the suburb of Kensington, or it's not really a suburb, neighborhood of Kensington in Philadelphia, was a mill district, a textile mill district. And prior to the 1940s, it was like a bunch of little kids getting their limbs chewed off in the giant textile mills and dying in factories and working barefoot and in rags while they created textiles for rich people, right?
Yep.
That horrible period of history that we forget kind of happened in America. And
Not that long ago.
Not that long ago. And Mother Jones was horrified by this. She was a union organizer. So she came to Philly and she organized a march of these children from Philadelphia, several hundred of them, to Teddy Roosevelt's summer home on Long Island.
Oh, wow.
To protest child labor and to insist upon child labor laws. The march was roundly attacked by the press and by conservative interests, because they would say things like, the children don't know what they're talking about. These children are privileged and adults are using them and manipulating them to do this protest. There's too much money tied up in child labor. We can't possibly dismantle this industry, even if you don't agree with it. Almost exactly the same reaction as the children from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas faced when they marched on Washington to protest gun regulation, or to ask for gun regulation. Exactly the same situation. The march to Teddy Roosevelt's home was considered a failure. Nothing changed. And yet it generated a lot of publicity. And a decade later, Pennsylvania was the first state in the Union to pass child labor laws, anti-child labor laws. And within, 20 years of the march, it was the law of the land that you couldn't use children to lose their limbs in textile mills.
That's awesome.
So
it's funny, you can't measure the reaction that the public has to something,
right?
And you can't know.
And children marching for their lives because they are the ones whose lives are being threatened. I'm like, oh my god, it's the same story. It's exactly the same story, and it's a Philadelphian story.
Yeah.
But I'd never heard about it. It's not well known. And so I was just like, oh my god, we forget our history, and so we repeat it, of course.
Totally.
And the way to keep history in our mind is through art, actually.
So are you hoping to convey that story with a choir piece or a theatrical or
yes,
opera-ish? Or
yes. My thought is that it's a piece for youth chorus with a couple of adult singers, a woman playing Mother Jones and probably a baritone who sings several evil roles, the bad guys who plays the factory owners and the newspaper people and the general public, and then Teddy Roosevelt. Not that Teddy Roosevelt was a terrible person altogether, but he was very sort of no, we can't change anything, there's so much money coming in, and these people are very rich and powerful. So look for that
definitely
in 2020/2021. I have really high hopes that I'm going to write this for a local organization. I'll leave it there.
Very
yeah.
exciting. And that about wraps it up. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
inviting us into your home and
I wish you
letting
could
us
come
break
over.
your stuff.
Oh my god, no. I wish you could come over and play and break my stuff every day, honestly.
Well, we can't, but
I know.
But we'll come back and do an episode with Matt sometime.
Yes!
That's the plan.
Yeah, that would be great, because and then we can get super electronic-y and spend 5 hours plugging cables into various recorders that may or may not work.
Sounds like a plan.
Yay, thank you.
Thanks. Last up today, we've got another relaxing tonal improvisation that we did. This one features lots more stylophone, and I swear we're not trying to sell these to you, but if you did happen to fall in love with the sound this episode, you can purchase one on Amazon for $34.95. Dave played the Stylophone beatbox to provide us the groove, and Melissa played the melody on the original Stylophone synth, which is set up more like a keyboard, but again is played with a stylus. And I played ukulele, and Melissa also added some vocals in at the end. Thank you so much for listening to Sean and Dave Make Music. If you like our show and you have an extra 5 minutes to spare today, please, please, please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and a review. Please also continue to spread the word to your friends and colleagues if you think they might be interested in what we do. And if you have any questions or comments or would like to submit a prompt for us to improvise off of, please send us an email at seananddaveMakeMusic@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. Just search Sean and Dave Make Music, write out the word "and" instead of the ampersand like our logo, and you'll find us. And don't forget to look up Melissa's other projects at melissadunphy.com. Her music can also be found on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, and elsewhere on the internet. And don't forget to check out the Boghouse wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back next month with more music and another fantastic guest. See you then.